What I learned in Sabbath school. Happy Sabbath, everybody. I'll start to tell with a personal story of how God protected me within the storm. There's a lot to draw out, and if time permits, there's another story to help kind of wrap it up. Zach, that TV's got to go. Okay. So if you turn to Hebrews 13, verse 5 and 6. Hebrews 13, 5 and 6. Let your conversations be without covetousness, and be content with such things as you have. For he hath said, I will never leave you, nor forsake you. So that we may boldly say, the Lord is my helper. And I will not fear what man shall do to me. So about 4 years ago, I had kind of a challenging period of time. So I work in construction, I have a family, I have friends, I'm trying to live God's way, and I also live in this world. And you know things can get spicy. So to kind of set this story up properly, I was a foreman building a house. I had a superintendent who's acting unreasonable. The fall holy days are just days away. I have one family member in the throes of the addiction cycle, and I'm in the process of preparing for a sermonette that to give before we leave for the feast. It was stressful. As the feast approaches, I had a hard time feeling good about leaving because I could see that our project was beginning to bog down. And when I returned, someone else was doing my job and was not interested in leaving or stepping aside. Thank you. Later that same day when I came back, my superintendent came up and said, I quit. I'm taking for a leave of absence. And he packed up and left that day and basically had a nervous breakdown. Our company ownership scrambled to fill the gap, bringing in 2 superintendents and 2 more foremen. And in their race to figure out the schedule, they became absorbed in understanding how to start off with this project and where the building process was at that point. And this went on for a couple of weeks. In that meantime, I mustered the carpenters and the subcontractors and began to keep them busy and continue doing layout and answer questions. And during this time, I began to see my leadership role begin to disappear. And I saw the new leadership running around, trying to verify what had actually been built. I also began to feel like the target of derision in the explanation of numerous schedule failures. What I thought I was seeing was the reputation of 10 months of project disintegrating in front of me. The new leadership, in an attempt to get their bearings, could not make sense of the details and concluded that nearly everything was wrong, as in millions of dollars wrong. Seeing the measurements missed, the elevations set too high or set too low, critical alignments within the building not realized. It was described as a disaster. By that second week, I was on the verge of quitting. I felt crushed that I had failed in such a spectacular way in front of my respected peers. I began to ask myself, do I even belong here? I could not understand how it was possible to have put months of effort in and still have missed all these measurements. I asked myself, am I a failure? I'm feeling a sense of shame of letting down my company. Customers with unmet dream, and an embarrassment to the men and women who strive to work at this level of perfection. And I can't even read my tape measure. So if you turn to Hebrews 11, verse 6. 11, verse 6. But without faith, it is impossible to please him. For he that comes to God must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of them who diligently seek him. At break time, I would slink off to my truck, and I would burst out a message for intervention, crying out to God for help to fight this battle. Asking for peace of mind, asking for good favor in the eyes of this world, asking for skill and ability. That was the drumbeat for several days. I was still feeling uneasy. I thought, why did God put me here if I can't even do this job? Or wait a minute. Is this feeling real? Are all of these the facts? Did they really say that? Or is that just something I think they would say? Are you really incompetent? Where did they start their measurements from? Do they even understand the grid lines? Is their testing equipment calibrated? Do they know the sequence of buildup for the finishes? In my meltdown, I overlooked the run-up of time needed for their mind to wrap around where to even start. Also in my mind, I connected a string of events that I saw and linked each one of them to my own personal fears. If you turn to James 1, verse 5 and 6, that's James 1, verse 5 and 6. If any man lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, that gives to all men liberally, and upbraideth not, and it shall be given. But let him who asks in faith, nothing wavering, for he that waves is like a wave on the sea, driven by the wind and tossed. So as the days went on, God intervened. He is merciful, he is faithful, and he has turned the hearts of kings. I was renewed in confidence, and I walked the leadership through all the details and all of the layouts. Later, at a project meeting, it was acknowledged that I was not responsible for the schedule, and that I was the only one that knew what was being built here. I was moved up to a position of project engineer, the brain trust, and interior layout guru. It turned out everything was built correctly. So, in that story, it's an example of being buffeted, finding God's peace in that whirlwind by focusing on God instead of the flying debris around me and the floor falling out away. It was a moment of intentionally living by faith and trusting God. It's the Hebrews 11:6. But without faith, it is impossible to please him. For he that come to God must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of them that diligently seek him. So keep this in mind. We are protected as we seek God. If you turn to Isaiah 42, verse 6 and verse 7. It's Isaiah 42, verse 6 and 7. I, the Lord, have called you in righteousness, and will hold your hand and will keep you and give you a covenant of the people. For a light of the Gentile, to open the blind eyes, to bring the prisoners out, and them that sit in the darkness of the prison house. So God has called each of us into his knowledge and into his character. He is going to protect us and provide for us as we walk with him by the hand. We are safely held in his hand. He will use our life as an example of his ways to the people of this world who do not know God, that do not know how to live, to bring freedom to those who are in bondage in their own prison. We have to be childlike to ask God to take our hand and to be shown the way. We are to be humble to ask for his protection, not to rely on our own strength or our own mind. So remember, God is protecting us as we seek him. In 2 Corinthians 4, verse 4, 2 Corinthians 4, verse 4, in whom the God of this world has blinded the minds of them which believe not, lest the light of Christ, who is the image of God, should shine on them. In that verse, we're shown that we are protected from the deception of Satan. In Luke 22, verse 31 and 32, Luke 22, 31, 32. And the Lord said, Marcia, 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 behold, Satan has desired to have you, that he may sift you as wheat. But I prayed for you, that your faith would fail not. And when you are converted, strengthen your brethren. In this verse, it shows that we are protected from Satan's direct attack. So God protects us as we seek him. In 1 Corinthians 2, verse 11 and 12, 1 Corinthians 11, verse 11, 1 Corinthians 2, verse 11 and 12. For what man knows the things of man, save the spirit of man, which is in him? ? Even so, the things of God know no man, but the spirit of man. It kind of sounds like hickory-dickory-dock, the mouse ran up the clock. So the translation is, man knows about the physical man, but man does not understand the spirit of God. In verse 12, Now we have received not the spirit of the world, but the Spirit which is of God, that we might know the things that are freely given to us by God. And this verse shows that we are protected from being in ignorance of God's knowledge and his character, because he has freely given us his Holy Spirit. So we are protected by God as we seek him. In 2 Corinthians 12, verse 9 and 10, 2 Corinthians 12, verse 9 and 10, for he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. Most gladly, therefore, I will glory in my infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest on me. Therefore, I take pleasure in my infirmities, in reproaches, in necessities, in persecutions, in distresses for Christ's sake. For when I am weak, then I am strong. There are more people in my head than I care to number who are being crushed in the crucible. And I pray that as you are poured out, that Christ is poured in, and you can take comfort in being in God's hands and knowing that so many people are praying for you. It looks like we have the time. This second story, it caught my attention. So in the entertaining world of science fiction, this story and this fragment of a story, we'll wrap this up. So a device is made where the operators can look into the future and understand the events that they see in that future time. And naturally, they use this information for their own gain in the present day. As they looked further into the future, they discovered a way to manipulate the circumstances in their present day to change the future of the as yet to be future events. It would be as though you would be driving in the car in the freeway and changed lanes. You have a slightly different view. Your destination will be slightly different. So to make things interesting in a story, a device like this can only fall into the hands of unscrupulous men. And to make the story shorter, kingdoms rise and fall, fortunes are made and lost, and millions of people suffer. Those who operate this device tried repeatedly to course correct further and further into the future. And eventually they came to no avail. At a certain point, all of the possible choices that they kept making funneled down to a single unavoidable event. And there was no way around it. No matter what choices were made, beyond a certain point, the outcome was always the same. This event, they described it as the Enlightenment. Something outside of time intercedes into time, into the time that they manipulated, and pulls back a veil, revealing the true unseen power that's been ruling humanity. And when this happens, all of humanity witnesses this. And it's exposed for what it is. It is all a lie. The people operating this device now know that this intervention against their efforts will take place and that it's unavoidable. They now know that this unstoppable power that has been behind them, they have used to rise to the pinnacle of mankind, is now rendered powerless in the future. They now know that the time is up. Everything that they have gained is lost. The game is over. For now, there are still struggles, there's still fights going on, but the result is a total defeat of this group and the power behind them. It's this description, it's likened to a master chess game. One move is made and both players know that no matter what moves are made after that one move, that in a few more moves, the game is over. It will end as a result of one move from the winning player, and no other move exists for the losing player to reverse this outcome. The only moves that are left for the losing player are forced upon him by the winning player. The outcome would only change if the winning player made a mistake in favor of the losing player. But being that these are master chess players, that is not going to happen. So do you get it? The game is over. Do you see this parallel? The greatest master strategy planner has called you out of this world. He has taken you by the hand. He is protecting you in the face of the adversary. He is teaching you by the gift of the Holy Spirit how to have his nature and his character traits. And when the smoke clears, we will have a role in God's government, teaching his ways to all mankind. See, in closing, God protects us as we seek him, as we focus on him and not the whirlwind we find ourselves in. Considering the weather, I'll give you some homework so you have something to warm yourself up to. You read 1 Corinthians 3, verse 9 through 13. And choose the best materials for good character, because you will be tested with fire. Happy Sabbath.